Holiday season's right around the corner, and with it, an entire wave of shiny new models from all the top 3D printing companies. Well, I've been torture testing all of them for weeks now, and here's everything you need to know before you even consider buying one of these machines. Let's get after it. Before we dive in, just a quick note, this is not a deep dive review. Instead, I want to pack in all the key info, specs, sample prints, unique features, pros, cons, and any issues I've had so that you can get everything you need to know quickly. But if you want to see an in-depth review on any of these printers, then let me know in the comments. And by the way, affiliate links are below if you do want to support the channel. It costs you nothing, but Papa needs a new MacBook. Also, on that note, the disclaimers. All of these printers were provided free of charge for review. All opinions in this video are my own, and none of these companies had any editorial control, nor will they see this video before any of you. With that said, do keep in mind that almost all of these companies have sponsored videos on the channel in the past. So while I always try not to pull any punches or be influenced by commercial considerations, and I do know my number one responsibility is to you, my viewer, I'm unavoidably biased because sponsors pay the rent. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to start this video off with the printer that I think most of you are going to be the most excited about, given just how many of you in my comments have been waiting for a large format multicolor 3D printer. But unfortunately, it is a printer that doesn't fit on this table at the moment, and that is the Creality K2 Plus combo. As of the time of this recording, I've logged this many hours on the printer. I need to go check. And I've done hundreds of filament swaps. For high-level specs, the K2 Plus offers a 350mm cubed build volume, multicolor capability, high-speed printing with a hardened and high-flow nozzle and hot end, a heated chamber, and it comes ready to print anything from PLA all the way up to engineering-grade composite filaments right out of the box. All right. Standout features. Look, it would be easy to call this just a scaled up copycat of Bambu Labs X1 Carbon, but there are a few interesting features that Creality has added. These include RFID scanning for the external spool, spring-loaded spool depressors in the multi-material system to keep spools seated nicely, dual auxiliary cooling fans, a heated chamber, and an LCD readout of the temperature and humidity right inside the multi-material system. Also, there's a suspicious barrel jack and some threaded holes on the back of the CFS, which honestly makes me suspect that if this thing doesn't already have some kind of dryer built in, it's probably going to have some kind of upgradable option in the future. But unfortunately, I couldn't figure out how to actually take it apart easily, so we'll just have to wait. Let's go ahead and take a look at some sample prints. Hey, editing Jonathan here. Let's talk about these guys. They look awful. And Creality actually reached out because I uploaded a short and we did some troubleshooting and they let me know a few things. First of all, I reduced the extrusion flush multiplier to I think 0.75 or 0.8. And clearly you cannot be doing that with contrasts as big as black and red because you can see there's a ton of bleed. But in addition to that, Creality pointed out that I had turned off the calibration when I reprinted it. This failed at first, and then I reprinted it. And I turned off the calibration. So here, they claim it's not a layer shift. It's an issue with the calibration, either of the filament or of the input shaping. Okay, I can buy that. And then the last thing they let me know is that you're really not supposed to use multicolor prints with a 0.15mm layer height, which is kind of disappointing because if you're doing multicolor, you do want to have that really, really high quality. They let me know that I should be doing a minimum of 0.2 layer height for color changes. I've got another print running off now that we're going to take a look at in just a second with all the automatic extrusion, calibration and pressure advance actually enabled this time. We're going to see if it looks better. I'm going to chalk this one up to, again, me abusing and stress testing the machine with low extrusion, flow, clearance, flush, whatever, and also very, very small layer heights. Okay, hey, I'm back. I did another print, this time with Creality's recommended settings, and I did this one specifically to highlight the limitations of doing a multicolor print with 0.2 millimeter layer heights. That's something Creality needs to work out. I mean, the color changing looks good here. The printer is good. There's no layer shift or anything like that. The purge is great, but I think this print highlights why you really do need to be able to do multicolor prints at a smaller layer height. And this is an extreme example with, a rounded edge. There's a lot of potential here. I just think they need to tune things better so that you can actually use what the printer is capable of, which is significantly smaller layer heights for multicolor. Obviously, I'm going to keep testing and putting this thing through its paces, but I think that's enough sample prints for this video. We've got a lot of other printers to get to. Okay, let's talk about what I like. Now, you guys know, if you've been around the channel before, that I have had some criticisms of Creality in the past. But there is a lot to like about this machine when it works as intended. For the first 50 or so hours, it was incredibly hands-off. It just worked, both in printing and in reliably loading and unloading the filament. I also like that the stock nozzle is hardened steel, and that it can be removed without having to remove the entire hot end and mess with wires. It has an impressive ventilation system with plenty of activated charcoal or carbon, which will be great for printing engineering materials. The build quality and materials are top-notch, easily the best quality I've seen from Creality ever. I also discovered some very, very smart features of the CFS, including the ability to actually clear jams without taking the whole thing apart, and the ability to easily remove the Bowden tubes from the hub, both of which are clearly really great improvements that Creality made based on issues that users have had with the original Bamboo Lab AMS. So nice going, Creality. But now let's talk about what I dislike. There are still a number of smaller things that I'm not happy about with the K2 Plus, at least not right now. Surprisingly, I actually have only 2 minor gripes on the hardware side. For some reason, it uses yet another unique nozzle size and a single-sided unique proprietary build plate size, both of which are annoying if you already have spare parts from other similar machines. Switching over to the non-hardware gripes, I actually have a bunch. First, while Creality does give you root access to the printer, I'm not sure what I can do with it because it runs something called Tina Linux, but it doesn't even have Git installed, and I can't figure out how to install it, which means that I can't figure out how to install anything. Octo Everywhere, Moonraker, Mainsail. I'm actually not even 100% sure that this machine runs Clipper at all, but if it does, Creality is under an obligation to open source any software that is based on Clipper, which I genuinely hope that they will do. This is probably something the average user doesn't care about, but it will be a turnoff for advanced users like myself who want to install those plugins and upgrades. Second, while the Creality slicer has improved significantly, it's still not nearly as polished or as feature-rich as Orca Slicer, the latter of which will work for slicing, but currently doesn't support multi-material mapping or some of the features of the K2 Plus. So that's another slicer that you'll need to keep on your computer in order to actually start the print. And even if you do install it, it has bugs. For example, there's this strobing effect going on my Mac. There's no apparent way to move things to the center, or there's different issues with things disappearing. Now third, the machine currently doesn't support remote printing or monitoring from within the desktop app. Sure, you can monitor it remotely or send pre-sliced G-code from their model library to the printer using your mobile phone. But for a printer that integrates with Creality's farm management software, it does seem like a big oversight to not be able to remote print. Fortunately, my rep at Creality did let me know that this will be resolved in December. But, you kind of have to buy things for the way they are now, not the way they're going to be. One other thing that I don't like is that because of the super long heat break on the K2 Plus, they're actually not retracting the filament before they cut it. So the amount of purge that you need is, I think, a lot in general and a lot more that it needs to be. They should learn from the ERCF and just retract the filament as much as possible, so you're only cutting off and then purging the very, very small molten tip. But let's face it, mostly these are a lot of little small things, except for the one big issue I had, so let's talk about issues. Initially, I had very, very few issues with the K2 Plus that weren't caused by me messing around with it and tinkering. But then I started to really torture test it with super long multicolor prints with a ton of filament swaps, and things got a little messy. Filament broke off inside of the Bowden tube, glow-in-the-dark filament clogged the nozzle, and I had repeated false positive clog alerts that required me to manually hit retry, but then miraculously cleared. And then I started getting this persistent issue where the printer thinks that there's a jam between the CFS hub and the extruder filament sensor, but nothing I do to actually clear it up seems to make any difference. What are you doing? Now, strangely enough, switching out the filament that was causing the issue to Creality brand filament resolved the issue for now, but I just need way more testing hours to see if this issue crops up again or how reliable the CFS is long term.
1 week later.
Hey, editing Jonathan here. So it's actually been about a week and I've put another 30 or 40 hours on the machine, including a 4-color glow-in-the-dark print with a few thousand filament swaps, which is actually almost done in the other room. And honestly, after a rocky start, the K2 Plus has performed admirably. I have had some extruder clogged warnings and the cutter has gotten stuck a handful of times. And also, one of the cardboard spools, which was mostly empty, was also too small to retract successfully. But all of those issues were really easy to resolve. The smart features discovered them. And I'd say that on the whole, the multicolor reliability of this printer is at least on par with Bambu's original AMS, if not better, though I do still think it's not quite as reliable as the AMS Lite. So I'm not sure what happened early on, but it all does seem to have kind of worked itself out, which is a little strange, but oh well. And about the multicolor print, in case I do end up showing it on screen, don't mind the stringing. I actually intentionally left the fluorescent filament waterlogged and stringy because I kind of wanted it to have that like fog effect that comes off of ice. All right, price. The Creality K2 Plus combo now goes for $14.99 and is available for pre-order now. Up next, let's take a look at the latest release from FLSun, the T1 Pro. As of this recording, I've logged 45 hours on this printer, so not a lot. For high-level specs, the T1 Pro build volume is 260 in diameter by 330 in height, though that is a cone, and you'll actually get a little bit more like 280 millimeters high everywhere but in the very center. It also has an ultra-high flow hot end for high-speed printing. For standout features, the T1 Pro is honestly my first ever Delta printer, and it's my first ever printer that uses a CPAP for cooling. But besides those two novelties and the price, I honestly can't say that anything really surprised me about this printer or stood out. I guess the way that they mount the spool inside is kind of unique, and it is a really good idea to make it so that you can easily remove the enclosure panels. And if you ask FLSun, they really want to emphasize just how much quieter this printer is than their previous models. Let's go ahead and take a look at some sample prints. Now just note that some of these were printed with normal PLA before I had it tuned, and others were printed in high flow PLA, and I'll do my best to add information on the screen to what you're seeing right now, so you can understand if it was due to profile tweaks or filament or just the printer. All right, here's what I like. There is honestly a lot to like about this printer. First and foremost, I am happy to see that FLSun addressed the noise issue that many other reviewers had with some of their previous models. This thing is not exactly quiet due to the unique noise of the motors, but it is livable. What's more, the T1 Pro is capable of insane speeds, and I've clocked it printing some of the features at 800 millimeters a second comfortably. Additionally, as some other reviewers have already noted, as long as you spend just a little bit of time customizing the profiles, or just join our Patreon and download my profiles, you will get phenomenal print quality out of this thing, particularly considering just how fast it's printing. Finally, the price of this thing honestly blew my mind for what you're getting. As I was testing it, I honestly thought that it was going to be a $699 or even $799 machine. So for what they're actually charging for it, it's a massive bargain. Unfortunately, there are also a number of small things that I currently don't like with the T1 Pro, though hopefully most of these can and will be fixed before customers start receiving them. First, FLSun has not opened up SSH access, which means that I was unable to install my own upgrades such as Octo Everywhere for remote monitoring. This machine also uses its own time-lapse function rather than just using the built-in one in Moonraker, which is a little odd to me. But more than all of that was the slicer and profile situation. FLSun has forked Orca Slicer into their own slicer, which is based on it, but stripped out many of the features that I regularly use, such as pressure advance, speed adjustments, and flow rate limitations. Additionally, the slicer has only one profile for each material, a 0.2mm one, which they are still regularly updated. So when I first tested the printer, things were printing very, very fast, near the advertised print speeds and capabilities, but in the recent update, things have been throttled back significantly. Advertising blazing speeds, but then only offering one profile that is much slower is kind of a pet peeve of mine, as is having a dozen different slicers on my computer. Don't get me wrong, I think FLSun has created some fantastic hardware here, especially for the price. But they've made some strange choices in terms of the software and the firmware, and I really hope that they'll fix those before shipping these things out. For example, I'd really like to see them provide a wider range of profiles for Orca Slicer, because honestly, as 3D printer hardware and firmware gets so much better, ultimately what really sets apart a great machine like a Prusa or a Bamboo Lab and a not so great machine is going to be how perfectly the profiles are dialed in. And in this regard, the FLSun T1 Pro fell flat. That's not at all uncommon when testing out pre-release printers though, as you'll see in just a second. Oh, also, I can't for the life of me figure out why they didn't just program in some kind of automatic filament load and unload when I push the filament in past the sensor. Like, why do I need to click 4 or 5 different times on the touchscreen while juggling 2 spools of filament just to change filaments? That's a bit annoying. Now, I've had a few issues with the T1 Pro, but here, a lot of it might be user error, as I did export their profiles out of their slicer and import them into Orca Slicer, only to realize that some settings didn't actually transfer properly, which I believe caused some of the surface imperfections and imperfect pressure advance issues on a lot of the things that I printed. When I begrudgingly switched back over to their slicer, print quality did improve markedly, and over time, I was able to get Orca Slicer profiles customized and perfected to where they printed just phenomenally. So in terms of actual issues with the printer itself, the only major one was that the cable harness was actually too short to reach the top and would get pulled out if I reinstalled this metal trim piece, which then forced me to cut into the trim piece. Now, I've already let FLSun know about this, and hopefully they can address it in future production. All right, price and availability. Are you guys ready for this? With all that said, the T1 Pro is an absolute bargain at just $399, and it's available for pre-order now. All right, switching gears, let's now look at a budget bed slinger from Sovol, which aims to be a low-cost alternative to the Prusa MK4S, with similar features and performance. As of this recording, I have now logged 72 hours on this printer. For high-level specs, it has a 220 by 220 by 250 build volume, all-metal roller wheels, it has print speeds in line with the fastest bed slingers on the market, a volcano-style hot end, fully open-source clipper and open-source design, as well as a touchscreen and more. For standout features, the SV06 ACE features a camera and LED, which is a first for Sovol's bed slinger line. And it has a USB-C powered tool headboard, which combined with the open source firmware and hardware will make this printer a great candidate for upgrading and modifying if, say, you want to try putting an ERCF or a different kind of tool head onto it. Also, like the Prusa MK4S that it hopes to compete with, you can see that cooling is pretty beefy, though I was able to find its limitations. Here are some sample prints that I printed on the SV06 ACE. All right, let's talk about what I like. The SV06 ACE is a no-nonsense printer that for the most part just works, from auto bed leveling to printing. The hardware is extremely solid, it's durable, and it's going to be really easy to maintain and upgrade. I have no doubt that this printer will thrive as a workhorse either at home or in an environment like a print farm. I like that Sovol is remaining true to their open source firmware and hardware commitment, and I like their take on Clipper Screen, which has a pretty good user interface. I also love that it uses a V6 Volcano nozzle instead of a proprietary one. Now, what I dislike. The SV06 ACE has a few shortcomings. Cooling and bridging on this printer are not perfect in an era where we've really become used to auxiliary cooling fans and what they can deliver. Also, I would have liked to see more and more perfected profiles shipping with this printer. If Sovol wants this printer to be a lower cost alternative to the Prusa Mark IV-S, for example, for those who want reliable and easy to maintain workhorse printers, they'd be wise to remember that so much of what makes Prusa or Bamboo successful is the wide range of absolutely flawless print profiles that you get when you buy a Prusa. As some reviewers pointed out when reviewing the SV08 from Sovol, simply offering one 0.2mm profile and expecting the user to create all the rest isn't enough. Guys, it would take just one employee like a day to sit down and create a variety of profiles at different layer heights and speeds and strengths, just like Prusa, Bamboo, and even Creality do, so do it. Finally, there's the price. I think this printer was intended to be a more budget-friendly option than something like the Bamboo Lab A1, but with Bamboo slashing their prices on that pretty regularly, including at the time of this recording, it kind of comes out to be pretty much the same price, just with a smaller build volume, no ecosystem, fewer profiles, and no multicolor expansion, which might not make sense for everyone but the tinkerers and the open source purists out there. All right, let's talk issues. I've really only had 2 issues with the SV06 Plus. First, I wanted to print out some of these rocket engines to compare print quality 1-to-1 with the Mark IV-S that I'll be talking about in just a second, but both times I tried to print it out, smaller features on it failed, as you can see. I suspect that this has to do with print profiles, like I said before, and that tweaking Z-hop or even the speed of smaller perimeters or overhangs would solve this issue. Second, I have had a couple prints fail a number of times due to fan exceptions. Sovol and I have been trying to get to the bottom of it, but honestly, after opening up the toolhead board cover and making sure that the fans are properly seated, the issue hasn't come back. So I suspect that it was just a loose connector from shipping. Read the title below to see if future Jonathan has had any of these issues again since recording. Price and availability. The SV06 ACE will retail at $299 with the first 500 units going for only $259, and I believe it should be available for order by the time you're seeing this. Now, let's compare the SV06 ACE to the mother of all bed slingers, Prusa's new Mark IV-S. As of this recording, I have logged a staggering 291 hours on this printer, but I do want to note that I've had it much longer than all of the others. High-level specs. Honestly, if you don't know the specs of the Prusa i3 platform at this point, okay, fine. 220 by 250 by 250, the highest speed printing that Prusa has ever offered, significantly enhanced 360-degree cooling. Standout features. The main thing that differentiates this Mark IV-S from the last decade worth of printers from Prusa is going to be the high-speed printing, the high-flow Nextruder nozzle from E3D with the Bondtech technology, and the upgraded 360-degree cooling. Let's have a look at some sample prints. You can see on some of these prints that I really wanted to test the limits of the cooling of the Mark IV-S, and it didn't disappoint.
Okay, hold up. Hold the phone, because once I got some of these under the light, particularly the ones that I printed on the Mark IV-S, and then compared them to similar models that I printed on the Sovol SV06 ACE, it quickly became clear to me that something was not right with the Mark IV-S. It's supposed to have these fancy new steppers, which have no VFAs. So I did an uncharacteristically large amount of testing and comparing and contacted Prusa. And yeah, there does seem to be something actually wrong with my Mark 4S. Now, normally I wouldn't give a company slack for something like this, but the thing about Prusa is you have that warranty, you have that live chat support. That's kind of the deal. And that's what you're paying for. And they immediately said they want to completely replace the machine. I told them, no, let's try and diagnose and figure out what's wrong with it. But I did want to point out, yeah, some of these printed on the Mark 4S are not acceptable quality compared to what Prusa has said the printer is capable of, especially not when you compare to a much cheaper printer, the SV06 ACE. And yeah, this is apparently not representative of what the Mark 4S is capable of doing. So we're going to figure out what's going on. And let's get back to some prints.
Okay, what I like. I've made more than my fair share of jokes and criticisms surrounding Prusa and their rate of innovation in the past. But this printer just works. It is, hands down, the most reliable 3D printer that I've ever owned. It's so reliable that, honestly, I usually prefer to print with this over my Bambu Lab X1 Carbon because it doesn't have a million different sensors and checks and processes that get in my way or think they're smarter than me. And the chances of a print succeeding when I just hit print at least feel like they're much higher. Finally, I love all of the features that Prusa has baked into Prusa Connect, which I personally had never used before this. Features like statistics, queuing, and much, much more make it clear that this is a printer that was designed to thrive in a print farm or makerspace environment. I love how easy it is to just maintain things like changing nozzles. I even like the touchscreen, even though it is characteristically a little kind of retro and not the fanciest, most polished GUI. It is super easy to get to everything that I need quickly. With all that said, there are a few things that I don't like. Obviously, like I assume most Prusa fans out there, I wish that this were a Core XY enclosed printer that could print nylon CF out of the box, but I do want to limit my criticisms to the kind that actually take this printer for what it is, which is most likely the final iteration on the Prusa i3 platform. And even with those qualifiers, I do still have a couple of gripes. First, a small one. I don't love that it doesn't have any internal storage or memory, and that you do need to keep a USB stick kind of dangling into the front of it. But I've honestly already gotten over that. My main gripe is the lack of a camera. At this price point, in this day and age, it's honestly crazy to me that Prusa expects you to buy an ESP32, print a housing, and then spend your own time flashing firmware and installing the camera if you want things like remote monitoring or time-lapse functionality, especially when printers 1/5 the price have cameras built in. Which leads me to my final criticism, and I realize that it's one that Prusa probably can't do anything about: the price. I absolutely love this printer. I love it so much. So much, you guys. It has made me fall back in love with Prusa as a company. But if I were spending my own money and I had to decide between this plus the Prusa enclosure versus, say, a Voron 2.4, a Bambu Lab X1 Carbon, a pair of Sovol SV08s, or like 4 or 5 different budget printers, it would be pretty hard to justify, especially once you factor in upgrades, shipping, customs. All right, let's talk issues. This is a Prusa. You can say a lot of things about it, but these machines don't have issues. I did have leakage from the hot end, but that was because of a cheap third-party V6 adapter that I was testing. The only, and I mean the only issue I've had is that a couple of times the printer has stopped responding on the touchscreen, but never during a print, and a quick reset immediately fixed it. Now, in case you're wondering, the price of the Mark 4S is $1099 assembled or $799 for the kit, and that's before shipping and import duties, but it is available and in stock now. Finally, let's also look at another printer that didn't fit on my table, and that is the Ideaformer IR3 V2, a modernized belt printer that offers many upgrades and improvements that have never actually been done before on a belt printer. As of this recording, I have logged 86 hours on this printer. For the high-level specs, you're looking at 250 by 250 by infinity print volume, high-speed printing, open source clipper, and clipper screen. For standout features, this is not only the first belt printer to ever run clipper and print at clipper speeds, it is also the first belt printer to ever have auto bed leveling, which works perfectly. And to help with transferring large files, it supports 5 GHz networks, which most printers do not. Now, let's have a look at some sample prints. You can see that I took some time to figure out what can and cannot be printed on a belt printer, but once I did, I got great results and the print quality far exceeded my expectations. Now, what I like. The construction of this machine is phenomenal. The print quality is too. It's super reliable with things like clog detection working well. I'm glad to see that it runs open source clipper and clipper screen and that they provide SSH access so that you can upgrade or change things about the firmware. I also like the metal bed and the use of a standard nozzle size rather than some strange proprietary one. Now, what I dislike. There are a lot of things that I don't like about this printer, but almost all of them are very, very small. I don't like the placement of the LED bar, for example. The external webcam, without even a provided model for printing and mounting to the extrusions, seems like an afterthought. Sometimes loading filament can be a little bit annoying and kind of fiddly. A bigger gripe that I have, though, is the MSRP price. The initial price for the first backers on Kickstarter is just $4.99, and that's a steal. But the MSRP is listed at $10.99. Now, I don't know if they ever actually plan on charging that, but if they do, it seems really too high, especially now that we all know that they can afford to sell the printer at $4.99. Also, an extra $100 for a conveyor add-on does seem a little bit high. One more thing, I almost forgot. The slicer that you need to use with this printer is the Idea Maker slicer from Raise 3D, which is clunky, not super intuitive, crashes sometimes, and just generally is not nearly as good as the slicers we've all come to know and love. That's not so much a criticism of the printer, but I really wish that Ideaformer would dedicate some resources to adding belt printing to Orca Slicer, which seems to be much more updated and much more polished. The only real issues that I've had with this printer were due to the limitations of belt printing as a whole. But there is one pesky issue where it takes a while to wake the touchscreen up after it's gone to sleep. Other than that, this thing has been a dream to operate, though I can't say the same for the slicer. Now, I already covered the price of this printer, but let me just add that by the time this video goes live, the Kickstarter should still be going on, and you should be able to get it for around $560 US. And they claim they'll ship most of the units in December and January. But because this is a Kickstarter, there's no actual guarantee that you ever actually get the printer, so buyer beware. So I'd love to hear what all of you think of these printers in the comments below, or anything else that you would like to know that I didn't cover. And once more, I'll just remind you that if you do want to support the channel at no cost to you, do feel free to use my affiliate links in the descriptions before purchasing. But if another content creator's review helped you more than this one, then remember to click their link to support them, because whichever link you click before ordering is the one that gets the credit. That's all for this week, but I'll see all of you on the next layer.